What would you say is a tough experience that you've been through in your life, and how would you say you've overcome it?
I think just growing up in this country, man. I'm Pakistani, right? And I grew up in this country in the 70s and 80s. And it was tough, man. It was like, I mean, the city's lovely, it's multicultural, it's like diverse, a lot of languages spoken. But back then, London was grey and white, right? And we had, those of us Pakistani, Asians, African, Caribbean, people who come here as kind of immigrants, like my parents, it was tough. We were always like having to be careful, watch particular areas. I mean, you're from East London, right? Like sometimes we would get chased in East London.
Yeah.
Well, you get chased in South London where I grew up, right? And there'd be like groups of skinheads, teddy boys, rockers. They were like had knives and stuff, and you know, like you could get serious injuries.
Wow, man. So maybe give us an example of something that maybe like also like directly happened to you as well. Like maybe like was there like some sort of verbal abuse or like some physical interaction that you had like with these individuals in your lifetime, man?
Yeah. So listen, I was down Green Street in West Ham, right? I went to see some friends there, and West Ham were playing that night, right? And some guys saw me and they chased me, and I managed to get onto a tube, get back down South London, right? Because you got to remember, back then there were like no-go areas for people of colour, right? You wouldn't go like certain parts of East, you wouldn't go certain parts of South, because it was just pure white, and you'd know you'd get grief, right? And you couldn't walk around safely. So back then, oftentimes we'd be in little groups just to make sure that we were safe, yeah?
Wow, man. And there used to be a lot of like attacks as well, just for white people, just for like literally walking down the street.
Without, I don't like using kind of racist terms and things like that, but you know, this thing called Paki bashing was a national sport back in the 70s. Yeah, people used to boast about it on telly and all this kind of stuff. Even the derogative terms like the P word, the N word, were used on telly. Right, we used blatantly, right, on telly. Right, Fools and Horses, for example, there were 1 or 2 episodes that used the P word, right? Okay, and you had politicians using it, you had comedians using it on telly, right? Look, in the 60s and 70s, you even had a show called The Black and White Minstrels, where white people blackened their faces, and that was on telly. That was like Saturday night prime TV.
So then how was it like growing up in that type of environment, like going to school in that type of environment? How are you kind of managing life, man, on the day-to-day?
You know, listen, it was rough. I mean, those of us from South Asian backgrounds, like we had to learn English. Like English wasn't my first language, so I think it was even harder for us in some ways to fit in different religions, all this kind of stuff as well. So it was really tough.
Yeah.
You know, there'd be like jokes about what you ate. You know, it's so funny. Like I find it so ironic that British people love curry. But back then there'd be curry jokes. So if you ever brought curry into your, I don't know, for your sandwiches or you know, your food for school and stuff like that, yeah, for lunch, you'd get like all kinds of grief, you know what I mean? From like people saying, what's that smelly food, etc., etc. And then, you know, fast forward 30, 40 years, and tandoori chicken and curry is like national dish, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Let me ask you a few more questions, man.
Yeah,
then, like, you know, when you're growing up in that environment at that age, did you ever wish like you wanted to go back?
do you know what? Kind of in a sense, yeah, because we still had that tie back to Pakistan, India, people to the Caribbean. So we had a kind of foot back home, but a lot of us, well, some of us were born here.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of like made it slightly different, right? So if you're born here, even how many times you go back home, etc., you're kind of like, you're from here, right? Okay?
Yeah.
Even though you might have roots in
And
the
back
Caribbean.
there you
Asia.
don't really belong as well.
Yeah,
isn't
you
it?
don't belong there either, right?
Yeah.
People look at you, speak funny, whatever.
100%.
So it was hard kind of fitting in both worlds. But you know what? We made this place our own, right? You know, we had you know, I was in the cruise, I was into hip hop, right? I was one of the first Asian guys playing hip hop, right? Back in the 80s and 90s in clubs. So we kind of fused the Bhangra, South Asian music with hip hop and stuff. And I got into theatre, acting, writing. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, we had our own kind of struggles, and we made sure our voices could be heard back then.
100%, man. Let me ask you 2 difficult questions, man. Yeah. So obviously, you know, in the climate, you know, in the society we live in now, it's quite politically divided, right?
Yeah,
we have on the one side, we have like the, you know, the far right, like people like Tommy Robinson saying, you know, all these illegal immigrants, all these Pakistanis, they're doing like, they're grooming gangs, they're obsessed with this stuff. And on the other side, you got people that are like completely on the left, you know, postmodernists, they're saying that the UK is like a racist nation and stuff like this. Let me ask you a question, man. Do you think then the UK still has like an issue with racism today?
Yeah, of course it has, because these people don't know their history, right? They don't know that like there was a British Empire. The whole reason me and you are sitting here chatting, we're talking that right now, is because the British were in our countries.
Yeah.
Even reason why I'm speaking English now to you.
Yeah.
If the French had ruled, I'd be speaking in French, wouldn't I? I'd be busting that language, right?
Yeah.
I'm speaking in English to you now as a Pakistani because the British were in India and colonized us and gave us his tongue, right?
Yeah.
So we're inextricably linked. Britain is inextricably linked with all these other countries in the world, right? That's why there's Caribbean people playing for the football team, right? That's why.
100%. Then would you go as far as to say there's still institutional racism and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course there is, mate. It's like, you know, otherwise you'd be on primetime TV rather than doing this as an independent gig. You know, there's lots of doors which are still closed for us, right? And we got to like push open those doors. But I like what you're doing because you're doing it on an independent tip.
Let me ask you,
yourself,
so let me ask you on the other side, man. So then what would you say to the, like, why do you think the likes of Tommy Robinson and more people are rallying towards him, man? So I guess like, because he's often talking about like these, you know, grooming gangs, he's talking about these illegal immigrants. And I think obviously to a degree, I kind of agree in the sense that we should have like, obviously we shouldn't have like complete open borders, and like, I do get like a little bit of what he's saying in regards to illegal immigration and stuff like that. Like, 'cause I feel like today a lot of the like, you know, systems in our country are failing. So I think it makes sense that, you know, maybe you do limit, you know, the amount of people coming in. But like, what would you say to like the, you know, the likes of like people like Tommy Robinson and the more people rallying behind it? Do you feel like they have a point or?
No. Listen, Tommy Robinson, right, is just feeding on lies. It's feeding on people's fears. There are issues and problems in this country, right? Okay, but it's no immigrant that's closing kind of like schools down, right? It's not immigrants who are like to blame because of mass unemployment or anything like that, right? You can't put all the problems onto one group or one race of people, right? Or races of people, right? You've got to look at the decline of this country over a long period of time, right?
100%.
And the bottom line is, this country needs immigrants, right? Who do you go to when you get an Uber, right? Who cleans the toilets? Who runs the NHS, right? It's all our communities.
100%. But do you think to a degree we need to like limit like illegal immigrations or just like not to have like, because we need to know who's coming in, you know, and stuff like that.
I mean, look, you know, you've got to have sensible immigration, you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do believe in open borders, right? Because like the whole nature of it is that this country has gone to other countries as well. You know, it's like, you know, we live in a global economy.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can't on one hand say, okay, we need free trade and all this kind of stuff if you don't want to put restrictions on numbers, right? It don't make sense.
All right. So then, okay, one more difficult question, then we finalize it up, yeah? So then what would you say to those that kind of say that maybe institutional racism doesn't exist? Would you be able to tell them like why you think it does? Because you know there are some people on the, like, because obviously there are some people on the far right that say that, for example, institutional racism in this country doesn't exist anymore. Maybe at one point it did, but they're saying it doesn't exist anymore. Would you tell them maybe why you think it does? Like, is it police? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, listen, I'll just give you a simple example, right? I love playing football, right? I grew up playing football. I played for teams, all this kind of stuff, right? Why is there no famous South Asian football player in the Premier League? Or even in lower leagues, there's hardly any. Name one, okay? And that's a kind of little bit superficial. And then let's look at facts and look at the stats, right? If you're Asian or African Caribbean, particularly African Caribbean, you're more likely to, in terms of police, to be used, deadly force is more likely to be used. You're more likely to die in police custody. And these are facts, right? This ain't me making stuff up, right? Because I kind of work in that area as a campaigner, right?
Okay,
so if you want to see institutional racism, go and look at the police, go and look at sports, go and look at the arts, go and look at the media, right?
I think, you know what it is, there's a balance of both. I think both have gone too far. I think the political left have gone too far, the right have gone too far. But I think somewhere in the line there's a balance. Maybe let me bring it to my final kind of two questions, man. So what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned from growing up in that environment? How would you say it's influenced your perspective and understanding of the world? How has it shaped your view of the world? Because I guess, you know, going through that, it's quite a tough thing to go through. Are you still like an optimistic individual, or like, would you say like you're more pessimistic about the world? What would you say it's taught you about life, man?
No, I'm optimistic. I've got two kids, young adults, right? I'm a youth worker by trade. I work with young people, so I'm going to be kind of positive, right? My lesson is never to give up, right? However many kind of doors are closed on you, how many rejections you get at job interviews, don't give up, and also just think about doing for self, right? If we can't get into the mainstream, we set up our own businesses. Yeah, that's been a big lesson for lots of our communities, right? Okay, we're disruptors, right? And eventually we change the mainstream. The mainstream ain't going to come to us. We just change the mainstream from having kind of autonomy, respect, and authenticity. Yeah, you got to be yourself, innit?
And then bring it to the final question. Then what would be your message maybe to the people out there, man? Like maybe like, because I like what you said about disruptors, like kind of do your own thing, take accountability over the self, and then you kind of, so if you feel like you're struggling, for example, to go into a particular industry, maybe kind of pioneer your own way and your own kind of navigation into that. I like that, man. So maybe what would be, final question, what would be your advice to the people out there, man?
Don't give up, right? Seek and look for inspiration in your own communities, because there's so much inspiration. Yeah, if you look at kind of sound systems, if you look at Black British music, right? If you look at the culture and traditions that we come from, right? There's amazing stuff that we've done in our history, in our civilizations, right? Just look to our own culture, right? Look within, look to your families, take inspiration, right, from the elders, yeah? Because even the people who came before me, yeah, they had to face the truncheons. Back then, even before, they had to face the whips, yeah, and the plantations, right? So you just got to take inspiration from history.
100%, man. And we'll leave it there.